Let's step out of our modern world for just a moment and step into what was essentially a meticulous, highly engineered human terrarium, the medieval monastery. Now, in this explainer, we aren't merely looking at a place of quiet retreat, not at all. We are going to examine a highly structured civilization where every single sound, every calorie consumed, and every breath taken was deliberately designed to transcend the physical human condition. Just try to imagine the scent of damp stone and beeswax, the biting chill of the winter air, and the overwhelming, almost physical weight of utter, absolute silence.
Now you might think of monks as just quiet men seeking peace, right? Well, for the medieval monk, idleness wasn't just a minor character flaw, it was quite literally the ultimate enemy of the soul. This belief was the philosophical bedrock of their entire world. We aren't looking at a casual proverb here. To leave a monk idle was to leave a door wide open for the devil. And what that meant practically was that their entire existence had to be engineered as a constant, grinding engine of divine service and physical labor. They were a society relentlessly fighting spiritual corruption through absolute temporal and physical control.
So how exactly did they enforce this absolute control? Well, it all came down to a concept we call the architecture of time. You see, they didn't experience time as a flowing, open-ended river the way we often do today. For them, time was a rigid, cyclical, cosmic wheel. This was known as the horarium, a merciless daily schedule punctuated by the ringing of bells that demanded immediate, unquestioning obedience.
Just look at this timeline and imagine the physical toll. It's 3:15 in the morning. You're waking up in an unheated stone dormitory, day after day, bending your fragile biological rhythms to this relentless cosmic cycle. You rise in the freezing dark just to chant the vigils. By noon, you're finally taking your main and often only meal of the day, and you're doing it in complete and absolute silence. This structure was intentionally designed to crush individual autonomy, molding the community into a single, unified organism that existed solely to prey on behalf of a sinful world.
This brings us to a really fascinating logistical tension. You've probably heard of the Benedictine ideal of ora et labora, pray and work. Well, balancing that was incredibly difficult in practice because these monasteries were not just isolated spiritual retreats, they were the economic powerhouses of medieval Europe. They managed vast agricultural estates, they pioneered crop rotation, they brewed ale. So the huge challenge they faced was figuring out how to balance the heavy, dirty labor of farming with the crushing demands of constant, pure prayer.
To solve this tension, the monastery essentially fractured along strict socio-economic lines. On one side, you had the educated choir monks, draped in pristine white habits, who devoted themselves entirely to the complex Latin liturgy. On the other side, you had the lay brothers. These were bearded, coarse-clothed men living in entirely separate Western quarters, and they bore the brunt of the monastery's massive agricultural footprint. Especially within the Cistercian order, it was the grueling manual labor of these lay brothers out in the muddy fields that ultimately allowed the delicate, tonsured choir monks to remain in the church, endlessly chanting the divine office.
But don't think for a second that the choir monks had it easy. Intellectual labor in the Middle Ages was its own brutal physical hardship. They worked in the isolated, freezing stone scriptorium using only natural daylight. Why? Because open flames posed a catastrophic fire risk to all that precious parchment. So they wrote until the sun went down, their fingers stiff and numb from the cold. And we actually know this because in the margins of their manuscripts, they left behind informal notes, marginalia, detailing their aching backs, frozen ink, and biting cold, giving us a window into the true sensory ordeal of their devotion.
Now, all of this presents a profound historical paradox that I want you to think about for a second. The Cluniac monks pursued a concept called angelic mimesis, basically the imitation of silent angels. They believed silence wasn't just a rule, it was a supreme virtue designed to protect the soul from the moral dangers of gossip and idle chatter. But how exactly do you coordinate meals, direct immense physical labor, and manage a massive medieval economy without ever speaking a word?
Well, they came up with a brilliant solution. To survive this paradox, they invented a highly sophisticated, nonverbal grammar of silence. We're talking about a vast lexicon of hand signs encompassing absolutely everything they needed, from specific types of fish like eel or salmon to agricultural tools and even abstract emotional states, all utilizing the word order of spoken Latin. Now, to be clear, this wasn't a fully grammatical language like modern deaf sign language. It was more of a massive, highly specific vocabulary of iconic gestures that simply allowed the intricate machinery of the monastery to keep turning.
Looking at the historical records from the time, we can see exactly how this dormant language worked in practice. Rather than violate the rule of St. Benedict during meals or the Great Silence, the monks replaced spoken words with these hand signs. A monk could request a specific tool for the garden, ask for a portion of coarse bread, or even confess a fault to the abbot, all without ever parting his lips or breaking that sacred, heavy quiet of the cloister. But, human nature being exactly what it is, administrative customaries from the era reveal a desperate need to strictly regulate this silent language. Because nature abhors a vacuum, negligent monks inevitably started repurposing the lexicon to joke, bicker, or silently gossip with one another. The authorities actually had to step in with severe rulebooks, warning that a monk could endanger his eternal soul just as easily with a loose, garrulous hand gesture as he could with a loose tongue.
Okay, so let's take a step back here. When you combine the chronic lack of sleep, the freezing winter temperatures, the heavy, monotonous diet of vegetables, and this unrelenting discipline, you hit a wall. Ultimately, the extreme physical exhaustion of the cloister demanded a sanctioned psychological and physical escape. Human biology inevitably pushed back against the soaring, ascetic ambitions of the human spirit.
The answer to this biological breaking point was a fascinating medical ritual called munitio. Rooted deeply in classical Greek humoral theory, medical authorities believed that draining a monk's blood would restore humoral balance, sharpen their sensory focus, and actively suppress illicit worldly desires. The monastic leadership viewed this as absolutely essential. It wasn't just physical health care, it was a crucial spiritual tool. They actually believed it could literally produce a clearer, more angelic singing voice for the choir. Now, draining up to 4 pints of blood sounds absolutely brutal to us today. But here's the thing. The resulting 3-day convalescence was a deeply coveted holiday for these men. During this recovery time, monks were completely excused from the midnight chants, they were forbidden to read, and they were fed rich, warming meats right beside a roaring fire to rebuild their strength. It acted as a desperately needed psychological safety valve. It was a complete, officially sanctioned escape from the crushing weight of the horarium before they were inevitably thrust back into the perpetual cycle of prayer and labor.
And this is where the story gets even more incredible. Because this highly regulated approach to managing biological limits did not just stay locked away behind cloistered walls. It actively transformed medieval society. The monastic approach to convalescence, humoral balance, and their strict mandate to treat any sick guest as if they were Christ himself, well, that laid the philosophical and structural groundwork for the medical institutions that you and I rely on today.
That's right, monastic infirmaries essentially created the structural foundations for the modern hospital system. They were the ones who pioneered specialized disease wards, separating out infectious patients. They utilized environmental airflow controls, and they established systematic diagnostic patient care. By carefully observing the afflicted, examining diagnostics like urine, and combining targeted herbal remedies with spiritual confession, these cloistered monks quietly revolutionized the way human beings care for the vulnerable.
So what does this all mean for us? It leaves us with a profound question about the human condition. The medieval cloister proves that even in our most extreme, highly engineered attempts to transcend the physical world, our humanity and our biology ultimately dictates how we live. From the meticulous invention of a silent language to the roaring fires of the infirmary, the monks showed us that to reach for the heavens, they first had to master the earth. Thank you so much for exploring this incredible history with me.